Sodium chloride is essential for optimal livestock health and production in many regions of New Zealand where salt is deficient in soils and pastures. For over 7 decades, Dominion's salt has provided most of these needs for livestock through its agricultural division called Summit Salt.
Dominion Salt was started in 1942 at Lake Grasmere, and although we're on the Mount Maunganui site, it's still very much concerned with agriculture and is built upon salt, so we are a one-product company. However, around 200,000 tonnes a year of salt is sent out to the agriculture industry, the paper industry, and increasingly so, about a third of our revenues are generated from exports overseas, primarily of high-grade food and pharmaceutical salt. We're the only producers of salt, so in New Zealand there is only one salt-producing field, which is Lake Grasmere. But Lake Grasmere is unable to satisfy the demand of New Zealand and certainly not satisfy the total demand of our exports now. So we import a lot of salt, and the pile behind here is actually primarily Australian salt augmented with salt from Lake Grasmere. So in a word, we're the only producer, we're certainly not the only seller of salt in New Zealand. 25 to 30% of the business would be agriculture. In the wider business, obviously a lot more in terms of food and food processing is associated with agriculture. So a longbow would say perhaps 50% of the business could be associated with agriculture. We're an importer into the primary sector, whether that be stock feed, animal health, fertiliser as well, as farms become increasingly aware of nutrient balances and mass balances. We very much are in that sector, and I think that is one of the primary reasons that we've diversified outside of the shores of New Zealand. The business was originally started by our favourite industrialist, George Skellerup, back in the 40s, and they were looking for salt to bleach rubber, to re-refine rubber during the war years. Over the years, Cerebus Greggs picked up a half share of it, back in the 60s, and you'll know Cerebus Greggs for Greggs coffee and certainly the food products, and the other half is actually owned by Cheetham Salt out of Australia.
We're standing on the stack base at Dominion Salt, Mount Maunganui. The salt has come in off ships, either from our Lake Grasmere operation, and we do some imports to supplement what we can't make at Lake Grasmere. On the stack at any one time, we could have 30 to 35,000 tonne of salt. This is the starting material for whatever we make, for making all the agricultural products, salt blocks, for fertiliser salt, salt that we recrystallise and turn into higher value pharmacy salt. This is the starting material for everything. Salt is very soluble, and the reason for having the stack lined up high is so that we hopefully can get a surface on it that will shed some water rather than pond and dissolve the salt. There still will be some dissolving, but if we've got a surface on it that water will shed off, we lessen that risk. The raw material, no matter where it comes from, we are bringing in to this site solar evaporated salt. It comes from a marine brine source, ocean water. It's deposited with sun and wind evaporation and ends up being here. From the raw material, we've got the coarsest product that we saw in the stack. It's what we use in the fertiliser business. As we wash and clean and dry, we come into some products that are coarser and finer, and we split them in some screening. Coarse, maybe some agricultural product, but not fertiliser, and medium skins and hides type treatment. On the recrystallisation plant, the pharmacy salt, other dairy grades, we've got a much cleaner salt, higher specification, and finally a butter salt, which has been milled to the talcum powder type format. From these coarse materials, we put together agricultural mineral mixes. We've got a block, pressed salt block with minerals in it. And then on a completely different format, not made at this site, we have flaky salt. And that is for top grade food service and consumption at home. We're putting together in our block plant multi-mineral salt blocks, 20 kgs salt plus added minerals. Some of those minerals, trace minerals, iodine, selenium, cobalt, we add those to most of our blocks. We also add some other minerals for a bit of seasonal stuff. Late winter, early spring, we've got a magnesium block that we put out. We do some copper in the autumn, probably post facial eczema treatment. We've got a block that's higher in copper for cattle. And there's a slightly higher content iodine block as well. Stock generally likes salt. However, we also put in some molasses and we put in a volatile apple flavour as well. And that adds to some attraction. Animals will regularly go and lick the block. Without the molasses and the attractant, sometimes they can be reluctant after they've been licked a block for a bit. In the world of supplements, most of them are very low in sodium. Palm kernel, lucerne, maize itself doesn't take up sodium, and so we've got this little balancer that's got calcium, magnesium and sodium in it. And when you're feeding out the silage, you add this to it to get the most out of it. We're in the vacuum refinery where we recrystallise salt from the raw material and put it into bags for shipping across New Zealand and into export markets. The vacuum refinery makes high-grade salt, so it goes into dairy products, bread making, food processing, much higher quality than the sort of product we would put into agriculture. We're taking the raw crystal, we're putting it back to a brine, and then we're taking a crystal out of it again, and in that process it becomes cleaner and purer. The vacuum refinery is becoming a more important part of our business. From this site, does well over 50% of the products we put out of here, and it's growing. And we're doing that on export markets, largely with pharmaceutical salt and with food-grade product.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.